back to securities regulation. We are now on lecture 22. We'll start this lecture with the chapter on history and certain corporate matters. Now, this is where we actually have to put in some effort and some work. Now, most of this information is we can derive from the company's documents or even from the ROC, from the Registrar of Companies, right? So, let's start with the brief history of our company. When was it incorporated? Any changes of names, including, when it was converted into a public company. And for each consequent change of name, you will have each subsequent change of name, you'll have a consequent um, fresh certificate of incorporation. We then describe any changes in the registered office of the company um, and any major events in the history of our company. Now, this is something that we will not be able to get unless you actually talk to um, the um, the company officials, right? Same thing for awards and accreditations, whether or not the company has faced any time or cost overruns, defaults of borrowings, and now we come to main objects of the company. Now, this is a simple copy paste from the Memorandum of Association, and whether or not we have amended the Memorandum of Association. If so, when have we amended it, and what was the change in the memorandum? Now, typically, what we've noticed is in most companies, the Memorandum of Association is changed usually only when there is an increase in authorized share capital. The main objects of the company are typically not changed, right? So as we'll see here, it's mostly changes in the authorized share capital of the company from time to time. There's been a couple of changes where we've changed our name and we've changed one sub clause in the main objects clause, right? All right. This is standard language. If you've gone through it, all of this can be copy pasted, right? All right. Number of shareholders of the company, who is our holding company, and a pointer to the promoter chapter, right? Whether we have any subsidiaries, associates, and joint ventures, that gets listed out here, right? Any material acquisitions or divestments of business, any mergers or amalgamations that have taken place in the last 10 years, any strategic partners, they have a strategic partnership with BK Asia Pac based on their master franchise and development agreement, right? Whether we have given any guarantees, whether our promoter has given any guarantees on our behalf, right? That would come up here. Again, this is not something that you'll probably get from the ROC, and therefore, for the purposes of our assignment, this can be omitted in its entirety. A number of key agreements might be entered into by the company, um, which will have to be described over here. So, especially if there are any agreements with key managerial personnel or a director or the promoter or any other employee, right? There will be a separate description of key material agreements in the business chapter, which we've already covered, right? If there are any other agreements or key agreements that the company has entered into, um, those should be described over here, right? All right, let's move on. Now we come to a description of the management of the company. Now, the management is basically going to be the directors of the company. So we'll take a look at what are the data points that we need to pull out. And most of these data points, you'll notice, will be available from the directors' filings or the MGT forms on the ROC. So you've got your DIN, your designation, what is the term, period of the directorship, mailing address, occupation, date of birth, and age, right? Every time a director is appointed to a company, they're required to disclose which other companies they have an interest or directorship in. That can be put down in this column here. Now, the same applies to all other directors of the company in the same format. So let's just keep scrolling down. All right, right. Whether our directors are related to each other. So in many Indian companies, we know that they're run by it's run like a family business. Some directors may be related to each other. Then we come to biographies of the directors, effectively what their educational background was. So we see here Shiv Kumar Pullaya Dega is an alumnus of IIT Madras as well as IIM Calcutta. He worked with the Aditya Birla Group and is currently serving as the Group Executive President for Corporate Strategy of Aditya Birla Management Corporation Private Limited. He's also been the chairman and CEO of PepsiCo India and managing director of Nokia. So obviously, he's got significant experience in a number of industries, including food, beverage, and mobiles. He's also on the board of governors of XLRI Jamshedpur and IIM Udaipur, and serves as the chairman of the Mobile Marketing Association. In the past, he's also worked with Godrej, Mother Dairy, Nourishco, and Alpha Payment Services. Right. So effectively, what we're building up is a profile of the directors, including their educational background, their past experience, select past experience, as well as non-profit activity. Right. All right. So let's move on. So there will be a number of negative disclosures, whether any of our directors have been involved with a company whose shares have been suspended or had been suspended in the past, whether there are any arrangements or understandings between our major shareholders and customers, service contracts, what are the borrowing powers of the directors. So your standard borrowing power would be based on the Companies Act, which is under Section 179, Section 180. So our board has been authorized to borrow any sum or monies in excess of our company's aggregate paid up share capital and free reserves, provided that this sum shall not exceed 3,250 million. Now, by a special resolution, um, the shareholders can allow the board to borrow money more than the aggregate paid up share capital and free reserves, right? Term of appointment and brief terms and conditions of the appointment of the directors, right? So for this, you need to see the actual agreement between the company and the executive directors, right? What their remuneration is, then remuneration to independent directors, any profit sharing plan between the directors, whether the directors hold any shares in the company. Um, is there any interest apart from the fact that they're directors? Is there any other interest that the is there any other interest that the company may be involved in? Right, changes in the board for the last 3 years. Again, this you'll get from the MGT forms or the DIR forms. Whether committees of the board have been set up. So if you recall basic company law, you'll have three committees on the board, from the board in a listed company. You've got the audit committee and its terms of reference. You've got the nomination and remuneration committee and the stakeholders relationship committee, right? Again, the terms of reference and the designations and the functioning of these three committees are pretty much standard. And these committees are usually set up only when the company is about to go public. Typically, we will not see companies having these kind of committees, or even so, we will not see companies having even independent directors um, before companies actually go public. All right, so let's move on. We've got a management organization chart, which the company typically gives you. Who are the key managerial personnel? So it's not as detailed as the board of directors, but you'll have a similar sort of bio or a profile of key managerial personnel. Now, key managerial personnel are typically those employees who hold a fairly high ranking or a high profile sort of engagement. So Sumit P. Zaveri is the chief financial officer of our company, holds a bachelor's degree in commerce from Bombay University. He's an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He also holds a degree from the Institute of Cost and Works Accountants of India, 18 years of work experience in finance control, treasury, budgeting, and management information systems. He's worked with Nature's Basket, Tata Starbucks, Tata Global Beverages, and the Indian Hotels Limited. So you know that he has some sort of background in food, beverage, and hospitality. He's responsible for finance and accounting functions, including tax, banking, audit, controls, reporting, statutory and compliance, capital expenditure, and information technology related functions of our company, right? So, effectively similar to the director's profile, except that here we are adding what job or what functional role do they play in the company, right? Okay. Um, what are the if there are any deferred compensations payable to our directors and key managerial personnel, bonus of profit sharing plans, shareholding of our KMPs. Now, many times you might have a company that issues ESOPs, in which case, if they have converted or if they have exercised their ESOPs, which have previously vested, then those shares would come up here. Any changes in the key managerial personnel in the last 3 years? Again, this you'll get from the company itself. I think that's about it for this chapter. In the next lecture, we'll go on to the description of our promoter and promoter group.